Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolfuk again. Wolfuk the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolfuk to midfield. Miles Wolfuk with the pick, the heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Now, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5. Takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Howe showing the toughness for 6. Cardinals down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right. Goes to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag. Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll it apart. Now he's going to throw it and score! Christian May throws it to Payson in the end zone for the touchdown. May throws it way through the left hand. Was walking out on the run and threw it left-handed. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio, he's going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, here with you guys as always. And tonight, here on a Thursday night, getting you ready for the Tar Heels game against the Cal Golden Bears. We'll, of course, be talking to you guys about a whole bunch of different stuff here on tonight's edition of the podcast when it comes to that game. We'll have, the preview of Cal itself. What are they going to bring to the table in this game? A team that I think is much better than many people thought they would be in the preseason. So certainly going to be an interesting look at them. We'll, of course, give you the keys to the game for Carolina to find a way to come out with a victory, some of the Tar Heel storylines that are going on right now. And, of course, we will get to our predictions for the game. But before we do that, we have to talk about what is the breaking story right now with Tar Heel athletics. What is the breaking story really across all of college athletics, which is that Tar Heel general manager Michael Lombardi took a trip back in August to Saudi Arabia. He was meeting with the Saudi government. It was on the Saudi government's bill to bring him in. And he went over there to look to see if their public investment fund, which is the group that is invested in Live Golf, that's probably where you've heard of that before, if they would be interested in funding the Tar Heel football program. As in terms of where this is, historically, it seems like this is the first program to actually go overseas and look into this avenue of funding. There was a suggestion at one time by a Colorado staff member that they do go over there and look into that investment. As far as I know, that did not end up happening. I would not want to be anything like the Colorado Athletic Department anyways, considering some of the stuff that we've heard about them in recent years in terms of the handling of Deion Sanders' staff and some of the issues that they've had over there. So to me, it seems pretty cut and dry, at least from my perspective, that this would be a disastrous move for Tar Heel football to get in bed with the Saudis and be funded by them. They would want some sort of control, probably of the athletic department or some sort of stake in the school. And certainly that is not something that I would be about exploring. Especially you don't want the Saudi government to be having any sort of control over the student athletes. That's certainly something that should be feared if this does end up happening. So not the way I thought we were going to be starting this podcast, that's for sure. I could not believe that when I saw that story earlier today from Pablo Torre. I know a lot of people are wanting to say that Pablo Torre doesn't know what he's talking about, that he's making stuff up. Pablo Torre is pretty much synonymous with telling the truth on just about everything. He told the truth earlier this offseason. He told us everything that we needed to know about Jordan Hudson, which everything that he told us seems to be pretty true about her. And now he was the guy that really broke this story. So, it was confirmed by The Athletic. It was confirmed to The Athletic that this actually did happen. Dean Stoyer, who is the UNC vice chancellor for communications, confirmed to them that this did actually happen. Same thing was confirmed to WRAL's Brian Murphy. So definitely a weird story to be starting off this edition of the podcast with.
It's Tar Heel football in 2025. It's the circus that keeps on going on the merry-go-round. Definitely didn't expect that to be something that was on my timeline. I do think some of the initial reaction has been severe overreaction to him going overseas and simply having a meeting. And you're going to ask, well, why is this happening? Tell you why this is happening. This is a result of where college athletics is, where it's going, where the bottom line is as important as it's ever been. And Carolina is in a disadvantage with the conference that they're in, with the money they're getting back from their conference, and the fact that the Big Ten as a conference is seeking and is going to eventually agree to a $2 billion private equity deal that's only going to give those programs even more resources financially, which is the name of the game right now in terms of how you win in college football, how you win in college basketball. Yes, you have to evaluate players, and you've got to make sure you get the right evaluation of them on film, but you can buy a roster. And we've seen that in the last handful of years, and that's only going to continue to be the trend in the sport. So I understand from his perspective with where Carolina is at from a disadvantage financially, trying to find a way to load his program up with as much money as possible to buy the type of players that we all sat here the last 5 weeks said this program needs to win, because there's a direct lack of funding or there's a direct lack of talent between Carolina and some of the Power Four conferences teams that they've played so far. I could be wrong. I feel like if Carolina was already in the SEC, if they were in the Big Ten, and there wasn't the big financial gap that exists between those conferences and what the ACC is getting, this probably would not be an issue. But until Carolina gets out of the league, which is something we are both a proponent of, we're both an advocate of, but I understand it's probably going to be 20-30 before that happens. You got to be creative in trying to close that revenue gap, and that led Michael Lombardi to go overseas, meet with the Prince of Saudi Arabia, and see would they be willing to give Carolina some cash.
Yeah, and it's pathetic. It's a pathetic move from the university. It's a pathetic move from Michael Lombardi. You're selling your soul to people that are evil. We have known that for a very long time. The Saudi Arabians have been involved in a lot of dirty stuff, and it's not going to change anytime soon. And for you to be involved with that and wanting to have them have some sort of stake in your program, to me, that spells disaster, and that spells incredible desperation. I would rather just go back to having Mac Brown as the coach and being mediocre than deal with this, because this is a joke. This is the biggest joke in the history of American sports, frankly. This is worse than Live Golf. It's right on that same level of just, for some reason, wanting a foreign government and have control over your sport and over your university. Is this going to become the University of North Carolina, Saudi Arabia? Is that what you ultimately want? You want them being involved in some of the decisions that the university ultimately makes because of how much money they're pouring into the football program, and they feel like they should have some sort of say in that? I don't. That doesn't make any sense to me. And so for this, you went to this within the first 10 months of being on the job, not even the first 10 months. It was the first 8 months of being on the job. Did you even actually go to any high-end boosters? Did you actually try to find money? Because it doesn't seem like you did. It seems like this was one of your first plans to go and find money. And frankly, it's asinine. So, I mean, this is, to me, a horrible look for Michael Lombardi, an even worse look for the university, and continues to make you the laughingstock of college football, and honestly makes it as bad as it's been this entire time. I mean, again, today, when all this came out, again, every national media member is basically dying, laughing at the fact that Carolina is this desperate to win that they are willing to sell their soul to the Saudi government. That's a shocking place to be, when you could have just ultimately, if we're looking back on it, you should have just kept Mac Brown in place for another year. You should have just had him stay on as the head coach. You should have waited until this coaching cycle when there were more known quantities out there, and you should have just gone ahead and hired your coach this time, because I did not think coming into today that it could be more of a disaster than what you already have. But now you're talking about morally putting aside any morals that you have and basically saying we're going all in with the Saudi government because we're just wanting to win games. That's what's ultimately the most important thing.
Well, I mean, he had a meeting. He didn't sign a contract.
I mean, what's next? He had a meeting. He's probably I would assume that he is very open to this idea, because we know Michael Lombardi. We know what he's about. We've been proven through all these reports that all he's worried about is money. And I'm going to tell you, they are going to be willing to give you a ton of money to have some sort of stake in your college football program.
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely got an endless supply of it, but who's that booster that's closing the financial gap between us and the other schools? That person doesn't exist.
So then you just live in mediocrity. That's what you should be willing to do.
So, what I would be interested to find out if this gets reported, because, we know the Steve Newmark stuff. Well, when the time he took this trip, was the Steve Newmark stuff already announced? I wonder how much Steve Newmark had an influence in this decision, how much Bubba Cunningham maybe played a role in this decision as well. I think that's where, like, if he did this against their advice, then I think, okay, this is a real problem for, it's even more, I guess, troubling. I'm not saying that I'm okay with this happening. I'm just explaining to you why it's happening and why Carolina is in the position that they're in, where they don't have the financial resources that some of these other schools have. Like, Texas Tech, they've got a billionaire that is funding every program's NIL fund. Carolina doesn't have that. They could. I mean, if Michael Jordan wanted to back up the Brinks truck, he could fund every sport on campus. That's not something Michael Jordan's interested in doing. So from Michael Lombardi's perspective, his job is to put the best roster on the field. The best way to do that is to buy it. So let me go get as much cash available so I can buy the best players to come play for my Hall of Fame 8-time Super Bowl winning head coach. So we're not 2-3 next year and being outscored 120-33 against Power 4 competition. I ultimately don't think anything goes. I don't think this goes anywhere. I think this was pretty much a free vacation for him to go overseas, get wined and dined, meet with some pretty high influential people, something he can brag about when he's trying to sell the program. And that's going to be that. We have to wait and see. But I think so far what we've seen has been a severe and major overreaction to a guy having a meeting. Because that's, as of right now, that's all we know that took place.
Yeah, well, maybe it is, and hopefully it is, because if they do if they do end up taking the money, then there are not going to be a lot of players that are going to want to play here. Doesn't matter how much money you have. There are going to be a lot of parents that are going to tell their kids, you are not playing for the Saudi government. That's not happening. They do not want you controlled by that entity. And if they do end up getting to a point where they are working with them, I'm going to tell you, gear up for at least one game, maybe multiple games overseas where you're playing in Riyadh as a part of some sort of, I don't know, agreement with them. I have no idea. I mean, you look at Live Golf, they play, a couple of matches over in Saudi Arabia. You look at the WWE, they have multiple events over in Saudi Arabia. So you'd think that playing over in Ireland is an issue that, for Carolina having to play their season opener there next year. Well, get ready to be playing in Riyadh. Get ready for the basketball program to be playing over in Riyadh as well, instead of playing at the Dean Smith Center or whatever venue they will eventually go to. I think that's something that is very real that could be on the table. And to me, the thing that really sells this point is it's Michael Lombardi. I don't think he's going to be able to say no if he gets a good opportunity, because we know how Michael Lombardi is. Michael Lombardi has always been a snake, and that's exactly what he is in this case as well. So I would not be shocked if we hear about some sort of agreement between Carolina and the Saudis here soon. And if that ends up happening, it's going to be really hard to stomach that's how you're putting together your athletic department. I guess for some people, it might just all be about the wins, but for me, that would be something that would be pretty hard to support.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we don't got to find that out, right? Like, I do think you're overstating the influence that the Saudi Arabian government would have in Carolina's athletic department. They just have money that they want to spend. Like, they fund Live Golf. They don't control Live Golf. Like, Live Golf just uses their money to run its organization. I think that's probably what Carolina football would do, is just use the resources funded to them to maximize their potential. Do I think they're going to play games overseas? No, I do not. I think some of that is just again, more overreaction to this guy having a meeting, but hopefully it doesn't come to that. Maybe Michael Jordan sees this report, he gets ticked off, and he goes, nope, I don't have as much money as them, but I've got deep pockets, and I'd rather Carolina win with my money than the foreign entity's money. And maybe he backs up the Brinks truck finally and gives this program and these departments even more financial resources than they already have. So, if there was momentum to getting a deal done, I feel like that would have happened by now. August was 3 months ago. So he went there, left without a deal. It's 3 months, or I guess maybe 2 months in technical sense, since the meeting took place, and we haven't heard anything else about it. So yeah. I guess right now we're in a wait and see pattern, a holding pattern, if you will. But I think ultimately, when it's all said and done, this will just be another story, another headline that got blown out of proportion, because that's been the majority of the stuff that's happened since Bill Belichick got hired. And this will be a nothing burger, I think, this time next year.
They better hope so, because that would be pretty sad if they get to this point. Let's move on. Let's focus on Cal. Let's get ready for that game. That'll take place tomorrow night. It'll be 10:30 ESPN out there on the West Coast, and Carolina just looking for signs of life at this point. I mean, do they have anything left in this season? And it's weird to say. You're 5 games into the year. You're 2-3. You would think to yourself, well, if they're 2-3, that means that they're still fighting for a bowl game, right? Well, your 2 wins have been against Charlotte, where you scored 20 points. That's the fewest that any team has scored against Charlotte all season long, including Monmouth, the team that ended up losing to them earlier in the season. So Carolina's been even their wins haven't necessarily been great. The other win, of course, coming over Richmond 41-6. And so, I mean, yeah, this is a chance for Carolina to sort of get some things back on track. It would be a big win against a California team that comes in here, playing rather well. Carolina, in the overall series against them trails 0-2. Of course, you remember the 2017 and 2018 meetings for Carolina. Of course, that came during a downtime for the program. It seems like this matchup coming during a downtime in the program's history as well. So it certainly is not the trip that Carolina was thinking they were going to get, because Cal 4-2 on the season, 1-1 in conference play. You look at this game against Cal and you think what? Because I feel like both of us can agree this team is much, much better than we thought they were going to be heading into the year, especially with some of the guys that they lost in the transfer portal just before the season started.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we went back through the schedule, I think I had this as a win for Carolina. And whenever we talked about this game, it was kind of like, oh, yeah, Carolina's going to go to Cal. It's going to be a late kick. We're all going to be incredibly tired because we got to stay up until 2 a.m. watching it. But it'll be worthwhile because Carolina's going to win the football game. And that's no longer the sentiment, no longer the feeling. I don't think Carolina's going to win. I'm simply asking Carolina to go there and compete. And, they've had I guess, not a weird season, but they've got some pretty significant wins, if you will. I mean, they have a win at home over Minnesota. They made the trip all the way to the East Coast and beat a Boston College team, but they got a shutout loss at San Diego State where they didn't score a single point. And then they had a loss to Duke where they were up 21-7 and then gave up 38 straight points and got beat in blowout fashion. So they've got a pretty good record. For them, this is, if they get this win, they're on the doorstep of becoming a bowl eligible team, which for that program, for Coach Wilcox, that means a lot. Just because I think they're trying to find their footing since having to join the ACC after the Pac-12 fell apart. So, in a lot of ways, this game means so much more to them than it means to us right now. You add in the Belichick factor, that's probably going to be the most lively crowd that stadium has experienced in quite some time, which really makes it hard for Carolina to go on the road and come away with the win. So this game probably right there with that Wake Forest game, when we looked at this back in the preseason, we thought this was going to be a surefire win for Carolina. And as we're sitting here on the eve of the game, that no longer feels like that's the case.
Yeah, and a lot of it is due to just some of the guys who have emerged for Cal so far this year. You go to the offensive side of the ball, 24.2 points per game offensively, so not great. 351.7 yards of total offense, 255 passing yards per game, and 96.7 rushing yards per game. That's been the biggest issue for them. They haven't been able to run the ball great. Kendrick Raphael, who is a transfer from NC State, that name should sound familiar, has been the primary back and, has been okay. I mean, he hasn't been great, but he's been solid enough for them, for a squad that's running the football for less than 100 yards per game. But he is certainly someone that Carolina should be aware of. He is capable of having big nights. We've seen it before from him. So Carolina's got to be ready for that. Biggest guy they've got to prepare for, though, on the offensive side of the ball is Jaron Kiwi Sagapuatele, who has been tremendous as a true freshman so far this year. In terms of, what he's been able to do moving the offense consistently, he's been pretty good. The one thing is that he does turn the ball over a little bit, but, that is something that has really cropped up lately. He really started the season off hot, and that's something that has sort of turned around as the season has continued. So maybe Carolina able to turn him over. That's something we'll talk about here a little bit later in the podcast. A wide receiver, he's got two guys that he can trust. Jacob DeJesus is the guy in the slot, looked at as the short yardage guy, a guy that can pick you up 7-8 yards per play. But not going to provide a lot of the explosive plays, but somebody that he trusts, has over 300 yards receiving already this year. Then you got Tron Gazelle on the outside. He is the explosive threat, a guy averaging 16.7 yards per catch. He's been really good early on this season for them, found the end zone a few times as well. So certainly a guy that Carolina has to be aware of going into this matchup. Mason Minnie, the tight end, also a major receiving threat. He's a guy that has over 250 yards receiving out of that tight end spot. Not a great blocker, so that certainly is something that's noteworthy. And they do have to leave him in certain circumstances to help block in the passing game, because that is one of the weaknesses of their offensive line. Offensive line, pretty solid in run blocking situations, but the tackles, Leon Bell, Frederick Williams III and Braden Miller have all really struggled at certain times this year in pass protection. So that is certainly something that is noteworthy here. And really the struggles for them have been lately. So coming into this one, Carolina, could be able to attack those areas that haven't necessarily been great. You look at this Cal offense, I think Sagapuatelli is the guy that a lot of people are talking about so far this season. But what sticks out to you about this group?
Yeah, it's really him because he's got a fun last name and he plays to the way you got to pronounce it. He's electric and he makes a lot of plays, but he has shown here recently, excuse me, he can be turnover prone. And that's something I think hopefully this defense and the back half of the year can take advantage of and become much more aggressive and try to get, turnovers, whether it's interceptions or fumbles. The biggest thing is they've struggled to run the football. And it's going to sound crazy. I haven't been upset with Carolina's run defense this year. It feels like they've played really sound run defense, but when they've gotten worn down, that's when big run or two makes the numbers look a lot worse than what they really are. So can Carolina do a good job in the run game, hold this rush offense that's averaging less than 100 yards? Can they put the ball in Sagapuatelli's hands and maybe make him make a mistake or two? And Carolina, gets a short field for an offense that's trying to find its footing under Freddie Kitchens. That's something that you're going to look at. So there's not a lot of playmakers that I think Carolina has to be overly concerned about. I think if this is, one where you take away one or two guys, do they have enough other guys to step up and beat you? And that answer is no. And I think if Carolina can stop the run the way they've done for the most part of the majority of the games where they've gotten out of hand, and they put this offense in 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7s, can you get off the field enough to keep your team in it? I think that's something you got to wait and see because as we've seen with the shutout loss to San Diego State and the way they sputtered the last 3 quarters against Duke, this is a Cal offense that when it's off, it's off. And so that's going to be the thing for Carolina is can you make their offense have an off night?
Yeah, I think that's certainly something that they are capable of doing, you would think, with some of the issues that Sagapuatelli has had turnover-wise, with some of the struggles that, their offensive line has had. But I think the question is there enough talent on the field for Carolina? Is there enough buy-in? We heard from Brent Renner, he wasn't really disappointed in the first 2 games that Carolina played against power conference competition in the effort level that he saw out there. But in that game against Clemson, the effort level really seemed to be off. Carolina's got to be able to bring that level of effort that they brought at least to that TCU game. I know things didn't go great in that game, but it really wasn't until the second half that things got out of hand. You've got to be able to bring that same intensity to this game, maybe create a couple of turnovers, and then we'll be talking about a much different game. You go to the defensive side of the ball, 22.5 points per game allowed for Cal, 329.8 yards of total offense, 206.8 yards of passing offense, and 123 rushing yards allowed per game. The defensive line, probably the weakest unit of this side of the football, but they do have guys like Ryan McCullough, who is a really solid edge rusher, has 17 quarterback pressures so far this year, easily more than anybody on Carolina's roster has so far this year. And the interior defensive lineman, Aiden Keenanaya, is playing well as well. He is certainly a guy that is worth keeping an eye on in this game. He's graded out pretty well according to Pro Football Focus in the run defense, and has been a guy that has been a little bit of a contributor when it's come to getting after the passer. You go to the linebacker spot. Cade Uluave is having a really strong season in terms of the number of tackles. Does have some issues in terms of missed tackles so far this year. He's been pretty much hit or miss so far for most of the season. But when he, for the most part, when he's been on, He's been one of the better linebackers in this conference. Luke Farrelly, the guy next to him, also having a really strong year. So two guys that certainly will be a challenge for this Carolina run offense to be able to run against. And they form, one of the better cores in the entire league. And then in the defensive backfield, you've got playmakers. You've got Hezekiah Massis, who is simply a star. Already 4 interceptions so far this year, leads the country in interceptions. And Brent Austin, who is opposite of him, playing really well. The safeties, all of them grade out very well across the board. So this is going to be a big challenge for Carolina to be able to throw against this secondary. Even if this defensive line might be the weakness of this group, still feels like this is a pretty solid defense across the board. Numbers very similar to what we saw a week ago from Clemson. Don't think the talent level is nearly the same, but certainly an underrated defense in the ACC, and one that's going to challenge Carolina's offense.
Yeah, I'll use the word that Belichick used in his presser back on Monday. He called them a sound defense, and that's kind of what you thought maybe Carolina would be defensively as a unit that hasn't shown up through the first 5 games. But that's what Cal is. And the biggest reason why they are sound is that's the way you've got to play when you lack some of the talent that program right now is lacking. And who knows, maybe with former NFL head coach and alumnus Ron Rivera being that program's GM, maybe he'll up the talent level in the years to come. But if not, the way that they are going to be the defense that they are this year, and when they've been competitive under Justin Wilcox, it's just being, discipline, assignment football, doing the little things. Like, they're not going to miss tackles. They're not going to have blown coverages. They're going to be in position to make plays. They're going to rally to the football. All those little things that a defense that doesn't have the type of talent that Clemson has, that's what they got to do to have the same sort of numbers that a team like Clemson has with all the talent that they have. So that secondary is really tough. Jones Angel mentioned that this morning on the Mac and Bone show. I mentioned that, the Massis might be one of the more underrated corners in all of college football, just simply where he's at. How many people even know his name? And probably look at the fact he plays at Cal and doesn't think he's all that great, but that's not the case, which means that, hopefully Carolina can be able to run the ball to soften up that defense and be able to exploit them in the passing game. So it's not the physical and the talent level test that Clemson was, but it's going to be a defense that's as disciplined as one that Carolina has faced all year, which would lead you to believe for an offense that's arguably the worst in the Power 4, it's going to be hard to see Carolina having a big offensive day in this game.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I mean, when Carolina is as bad as they are offensively, matching up against this defense, it's going to be incredibly challenging for this group to be able to move the football consistently. I mean, turnovers have been an issue for Carolina, especially when you've had Gio Lopez in there starting the game, which it seems like there's a good chance that's what's going to happen in this game for Carolina against Power 4 competition. He has 0 touchdowns and has turned the ball over 4 times. So that's certainly not a recipe for success. And you hope that changes in this game, but especially against a defense like this that is very opportunistic. Carolina's got to be very careful in this game, or else it could be a very long night out on the West Coast for them in Berkeley. You move to special teams really quickly. Chase Meyer, Abram Murray splitting the kicking duties for them. They've been pretty solid so far this year, missed just 1 kick. Abram Murray has hit 3 from 40 plus, so it does have a little bit of range to him. They have not attempted a field goal over 50 yards yet, though, so not testing the range fully there, but still pretty solid kicking group. Punting-wise, Michael Kern handling the punting, averaging 43.4 yards per return or per punt. He's been very successful on that front. And then Jacob DeJesus, pretty solid returner of both kicks and punts. I know punts averaging a little over 10 yards per return, which is actually really pretty good. He's also one of the more aggressive punt returners in the country, 13 punt returns already so far this year. So Carolina has to be ready. Their special teams coverage groups have to be ready for him because he is going to be someone that if he has a chance to get the football in his hands and make a play, he's going to be able to do it. All right, let's move on to the Tar Heel storylines. But before we do that, really quickly, did want to tell you about our sponsor here on the podcast, Legacy Arcade. Make sure you guys go to Legacy Arcade. You can search it or just go to that QR code right there, and it'll take you right to the page. When you get there, use the promo code HEELS for up to $100 in free play when it comes to some of your favorite slot games, multiplayer fish games, blackjack, as well as roulette. They have all those available for you guys on there. So make sure you go there and check that out. You can win cash prizes for playing your favorite arcade games, safe, secure, 24-hour customer support on there, instant redemption immediately to your bank account or card, all major credit cards accepted, as well as Skrill and ACH. Apple Pay is coming soon, so make sure that you guys are checking that out for us. We would greatly appreciate that. And anytime that, or anybody that uses that promo code, it does help us. So that's certainly something that we're encouraging you to do. Again, all you got to do, go to Legacy Arcade. You could search it in Google, pull it up, and then use that promo code right there, or just go to that QR code, plug in that promo code, and you will be good to go. All right, let's talk about the Tar Heel storylines for this game. And when it comes to the storylines, I think the biggest one that you got to start out with is that Gio Lopez is healthy. And so Carolina looks like they're going to end up starting him at quarterback. The depth chart that was released yesterday for this game had Gio Lopez listed as the starter, did not have an or next to his name, did not have Max Johnson in bold either. It looks like, as we were seeing some of the reporting, when the injury to Gio Lopez happened and when there was some initial thought that he could come back for the game against Clemson, Gio Lopez is going to be the guy if he is healthy. And there's a debate that's going on whether or not it should be him or Max Johnson. Do you basically just throw the hat in on the season if you're going with Gio Lopez to try to figure out whether or not he's a part of what you're doing next year? In that case, should you even be going to Gio Lopez, or should you be looking at the true freshman? Or are you still trying to win this year? Do you believe that you saw enough from Max Johnson that he was able to at least move the offense a little bit in that game against Clemson, and you think that a game against a team that isn't nearly as talented as them might serve him a little bit better and might allow him to be successful enough to get you a win? I think that's the big debate that's going on right now. Personally, I would like to see Max Johnson again. If this is another game where Carolina just looks that lifeless, then from there, I think you can go and start to evaluate the rest of the quarterbacks in that room, whether it be Gio Lopez or the true freshman. But I think they're probably looking at Gio Lopez and thinking, we paid $2 million for him. He is certainly a guy that we want to see if he is going to be a part of this offense moving forward, so we know what to do in the transfer portal, or whether or not we're turned to, a true freshman like Travis Burgess or one of the guys from this past recruiting class next year. So I think that's probably the direction that they're going to end up heading.
Yeah, this should not surprise anyone, because every time that Belichick has spoken, he has said that they've been committed to Gio Lopez once Gio Lopez was healthy enough to play. And so, he's off the availability report. You read more about that at HeelToughBlog.com. They released an updated depth chart. Thank you for that. And he's listed as the starter, no or. And, kind of where I've come to as a fan, I no longer think bowl game is on the table for this group. I don't think there are 4 wins there to be had to go to a bowl game. Had a great conversation about that with Steve Goodman the other night on his show. But so with that, I've morphed into the rest of this year is evaluating for next year. And now, yes, you and I do believe we've seen enough from Gio Lopez to where if they wanted to move on, justified. I would not argue against it. The staff has not. And so if you let him play, Carolina's about to play 7 straight Saturdays or 7 straight games. If he plays 7 straight games and it's more what you've seen so far, I find it hard to believe that Carolina commits to him next year. They either turn over to Bryce Baker or Tori Newkirk, get in the transfer portal, bring in another freshman quarterback. I think they go in a different direction. So if I thought Carolina was still a bowl team, I'd say play Max, because I think Max gives you your best chance to win 4 games down the stretch. Since I no longer feel that's possible, I'm more open to this than maybe I would have been before the latest blowout against a Power 4 opponent. So we'll have to see how it ultimately all plays out. I think if he goes up there and stinks up the joint, I think then they'll probably have no choice but to go back to Max anyway. But I think they're hoping that this is the chance for him, fully healthy, recovered from the car accident, all that stuff, for him to maybe play the type of football they expected him to when they brought him in back in the spring and committed $4 million to him.
Well, I mean, the thing with the car accident was we were told by Bill Belichick that had no effect on his playing status in the opener. So I don't think that's something that's been lingering since then. Now, maybe it has. Maybe it is something that's been lingering there the entire time. Maybe that's caused some things that we don't really realize now, and that's certainly something that he could tell us later on after the season. But I mean, yeah, it's hard to believe that with what we've seen, that this is a guy that's going to be able to succeed in this offense. I think that's the key thing, is this offense is not going to look any different, guys. We have gone through a bye week. We saw the offense in the game against Clemson, and I get it. Max is much more limited than Gio Lopez. You weren't going to draw up any run plays for him as the starting quarterback. But I don't think it's going to look any different with Gio in there. I don't think they're going to throw him in there and all of a sudden this is going to be an offense that's running the ball, 50 times a game, using their quarterback running the football, 12 to 14 times. It just doesn't seem like that's what they're going to be able to do. And what they're asking him to do is to be able to move the football consistently through the air. And I have not seen that from him. I don't see an accurate quarterback. I don't see a guy that throws with anticipation. And if you can't do either one of those things, I find it hard to believe that you're going to succeed. I just don't think the Power 4 level is the level for him. He was successful at the Group of 5 level. I think he could be successful if he goes back down there to the Group of 6 next year when it becomes the Group of 6, to one of those types of schools. I think maybe they'll have an offense that fits him a little bit better and will allow him to be able to develop a little bit more. I don't think it's in this offense. And so to me, I'm not, maybe, I guess, believe it or not, I'm a little bit more positive. I would still think that in their mind, you're not even halfway through the season. They still believe that they can make a bowl game. And if you believe that you can make a bowl game, then you need to roll with Max Johnson. Ultimately, what do I think happens? I don't think they make a bowl game. So the direction that I would prefer that they go in, if we know that today, would probably be to go to one of the freshmen. Would be to go with Arturi Newkirk, who they seem to like better than Bryce Baker. They seem to think he's further ahead. He fits this offense a little bit more. Not sure what the reasoning is behind that, because we have not seen these guys, in a game. Only Arturi Newkirk in the game against Richmond, where he came in and threw an interception, and the media wasn't able to see them in preseason to tell you that, yes, Arturi Newkirk did look better than Bryce Baker, so that's the reason that he's ahead of Bryce Baker on the depth chart. So it's certainly interesting. It's a debate that I think will be raging no matter what, because if they do end up going with one of those freshmen, there's going to be people that support the other freshmen that are going to be saying that they should go with the other one. So there's always going to be debate about this quarterback position, but I just wonder, do you think that Gio Lopez actually gives you the best chance to win? And I think that should still be your goal right now. If you lose this game and you get blown out yet again, then I think that's when you turn your attention to, okay, this is probably just a little bit too much to overcome. They'd have to win 4 of their final 6 games. I don't see that happening. And so you would probably then say to yourself, okay, let's wave the white flag on this season. Let's start looking at this roster and start figuring out who's actually going to be a part of this group next year. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. The next Tar Heel storyline that I have is, was this the bye week where the fundamentals were finally worked on? We heard after the first bye week that all they did during that time was work on fundamentals. Well, they came out, and especially on the defensive side of the ball, looked like they did not know any of the fundamental elements to the game. So my question is, at this point going into this game, do you believe that this team is actually going to look different in terms of the fundamental stuff, or are we stuck with a team that is just going to be fundamentally terrible for the rest of the season?
Well, I think you got to draw the line of delineation where Carolina against non-power forward opponents done the fundamentals really well. They did good things against Charlotte, good things against Richmond. You haven't done those things against TCU, Central Florida, and Clemson. Where does Cal rank in terms of where they are on the Power 4 scale? I don't know. I don't think they're in the same stratosphere as those 3 teams that have kicked Carolina's ass. So is there a pathway for them to look like a more fundamental sound team against this Power 4 opponent as opposed to the first 3 that they played? Belichick will tell you, yes, that they got better. They improved. They did some more, special practice type of stuff that he was really pleased with. Michael Lombardi brought it up on the radio show that they had a really good week in the weight room. They had guys that set their personal best on squats and some of the speed testing that they do. So he'll tell you that they got better. But what does it look like when they put the pads on is kind of what we're going to have to wait and see. And let's make it frank, without that Dixon, in that secondary for Carolina, it becomes all the more imperative that's fundamentally Carolina's as sound as they've been so far this season. He's your best defensive player. He's not coming back for the rest of the year, more than likely. So I guess we'll wait. We'll wait and see. I mean, I think that's something that I do trust that they are drilling them on in practice. It just hasn't translated onto the playing surface for whatever reason. But maybe, with another week off, Carolina looks a little bit more fundamentally sound because that's their way to competing the rest of the way. They're not going to walk on a field, maybe outside of the Stanford game, where they have more talent than their opponent. So the way you're going to beat teams are playing fundamental football, and that starts tomorrow night against Cal.
Yeah, and hopefully, this is a team that it really has connected with, because I'm with you. I find it hard to believe that they are not trying to get them to be a more fundamentally sound team. I mean, the one area where they have been fundamentally sound the whole year has been penalties. They've done a really good job of keeping those down throughout the season, but it seems like every other fundamental thing in terms of tackling, taking the right angles to the football, stuff like that. Yeah, they haven't been doing that for most of the year. They haven't been able to fill run gaps the way that they needed to at certain times, especially in that game against TCU. Those are things that, are fundamentals towards Carolina being successful. And so hopefully that is something that has been drilled to these guys during this week. Hopefully that's something that we'll be talking about when we get on here to recap the game and say, hey, in those areas, they looked a lot better. They looked like they were a little bit more competent, and it allowed Carolina to at least have some sort of success defensively, because when you look at it, the tackling has been really the biggest issue for Carolina on defense. You look at some of the totals that Carolina's pass defense has given up, and you say, well, why is this happening? Well, it's because the yards after catch are absolutely ridiculous, because Carolina simply cannot tackle guys. So that needs to change starting in this game, because you've got some explosive offensive players on the other side for Cal. There are some guys that can make plays. I know it's not the sexiest looking offense that you've seen. It's not an offense that's putting up a ton of points. But remember, neither was Clemson when they came in here, and they found a way to absolutely destroy you. They turned that passing game into one of the most explosive in the country during that week. And so you need to make sure that that doesn't happen again. As we mentioned, Sagapuatele is a guy that, has a better track record than Taven Jackson did. And that was a guy that kind of carved you up in that game against Central Florida. He might not be on the same level as Josh Hoover. Not sure if he's on the same level as Cade Klubnik even right now, even though, with Cade Klubnik, you got to figure out where the heck he actually is, because there's sometimes he looks great. There's other times that he looks terrible. But I do think that he's got a lot of talent. If you're not careful, he is a guy that can hurt you. We saw it against some of the teams that they played earlier on in the season on their schedule. If you guys watched any of those late night games from Cal, they looked like a really good offensive team at times early in the season. It's just in these last few games where things haven't necessarily gone right. They got shut out in the game against San Diego State. That is certainly something that, will stick in the back of their minds here for a little bit. And you've seen them sort of struggle on the offensive side since then. So hopefully Carolina cleans up those things fundamentally and can be able to compete. The other storyline, people have been asking me this for a while. Are there any positives that you can really build on with this team? I think the one thing that you can look at is probably the run game, and you're hoping that Carolina can build off of that. But that really starts up front with the run blocking. Can Carolina find enough run blocking to be able to open up some holes for these guys, allow these guys to not get hit immediately at the line of scrimmage, and find some of those yards, some of those explosive plays downfield like we saw in the game against Richmond, to a certain extent in the game against Charlotte. You saw a couple of explosive runs for Carolina. I don't know how many big plays they're going to be able to hit in the passing game, because I just don't know if your quarterback is capable of hitting those big plays multiple times during the game. But you can still hit explosives in the run game. We saw it, a couple of times a couple of weeks ago at the NFL level with Rico Dowdle and the Carolina Panthers. That's how they got themselves back into the game against the Miami Dolphins. The Tar Heels, who want to run like an NFL offense, they can certainly do that as well. It's just they need the right run blocking, and that's one of the few positives on this team that I think you can hope going into the second half of the year you can build on.
Yeah, I think there's some other small positives that just don't get talked about when you're 2-3 and been as not competitive. Carolina's been better in special teams. They've taken the step that in that department that we begged them for under Mac Brown. Their red zone defense hasn't been as bad as you would think it is when you see how many points Carolina has given up. But it's because they can't stop the big play. If the defense could do what the defense is designed to do, which is bend, don't break, then I think you would think a little bit better about the defense. But the defense has, it's bended and it's been broken because they've given up big play after big play after big play. But some of their red zone stuff has been really, really good. But all that just gets overlooked, overshadowed when you've been as non-competitive as Carolina has been. So the most obvious one has just really been the emergence of Damon June. Guy that Natro Means talked about on Monday's radio show about how he showed up on the scene in camp, and they've just really found a hard way to not give him the football. He's probably been the lone bright spot in what feels like a lost season through the first 5 games. So, and that's what I think so much of this final 7 games are going to be about, is especially if Belichick is here for next year, Lombardi is here for next year. Can you find stuff to feel good about, find stuff to build off on going into your first full offseason with those guys running the program? Because they will tell you that the day, the time of their arrival hindered them from getting to get certain things accomplished. So starting tomorrow night, can they start to lay the foundation for next season? We'll have to wait and see. But it's really hard to find positives when Carolina's been as non-competitive as they've been in Power 4 competition.
Yeah, I think you brought up some good points. The run defense definitely, I think, has been better than we thought it was going to be coming into the year. We've seen some guys on the interior of the defensive line that have stepped up and played well. We've seen the linebacking core really do a good job in that area since the game against TCU. But Yeah, it's not getting talked about because the pass defense has been so bad. You've seen this team struggle in coverage. We've mentioned the issues tackling that Carolina has had in the passing game. And so everything in that area has been a disaster. And then, yeah, I mean, special teams has been better. Tom McGinnis, I think, has been up and down. He's had his moments where he's been good. He's had his moments where he struggled. Reese Verhoff, the thing is, we just haven't really seen enough of him. I mean, he's kicked 7 field goals so far this year, but we thought there would be more potentially. We thought we'd see him a little bit more, especially extra point wise. But even with field goals, we thought we'd see him a little bit more this year. But Carolina hasn't been able to consistently move the ball down the field. The thing I've been a little bit disappointed in is the return game, mainly just the guys that they've been throwing out there in the return game. Chris Culliver, I think, is a guy that, he's been active for these games. We've seen him a couple of times out there, playing snaps for the team at wide receiver, but we haven't seen him returning kicks. Now, listed on the depth chart for this week, he's listed as the primary kick returner. I hope that's the case because he showed you last year that he is incredibly explosive. So you need him out there, I think, returning kicks for you. Hopefully they do that. And then, punt return wise, you've been solid with Will Hardy, but it's been nothing to write home about. That was something that I think we kind of expected. So, yeah, I mean, those are areas that I think you can look at and say are positives. You're hoping they get a little bit better as the season goes along. And maybe those are things that you can build on for next season. But, yeah, it's that run game, man. It's that run game with Damon June. We've seen flashes from other guys. I think a big part of the reason why the other guys haven't really been able to shine, though, is because of that offensive line. I think that Damon June is just a monster that just runs through everybody. Guys like Davian Goss, Benjamin Hall, even Caleb Hood to a certain extent, just weren't really built like that. And so you need better run blocking from that unit to continue to show that that is a positive for this team. I mean, I gave the running backs a B+ when I gave my grades out. The other ones, I'm going to tell you right out, I did not give a higher grade than a C. So I think that kind of tells you where I feel this team is at, where I feel like that running back room is at. There's so much potential there. It's just about finding those guys some lanes to actually be able to run through. All right, last storyline that we have here. I just wanted to ask this question because I've had some people that have brought this up to me. Is this a winnable game that, like some people say? And it's a tough question, man. I don't know what to tell you. I would have told you a few weeks ago before the game against San Diego State, there is absolutely no chance that Carolina is going to win this game, especially if they were still playing in this form, and we were coming off the loss to Clemson. Like if this Cal team was 5-1 or even 6-0 to start the season, I might tell you, yeah, there's pretty much no chance that Carolina is going to win this game. But the thing that I will say is that Boston College did compete with them. Boston College looks pretty bad. That is a team that I think is right there near the bottom of the ACC with Carolina. I still think Carolina is probably a tier below them with how bad they've actually looked. They've been non-competitive where Boston College actually has been competitive in some of their games. But, yeah, I mean, I think the answer to this question is yes, it is winnable. But do I think that Carolina is capable of coming up with a win based off of what we've seen from them? Probably not.
Yeah, I think, when looking at the schedule and trying to figure out like which games are winnable and which ones aren't, there are some games that I'm confident in saying Carolina will not win. They will. Virginia, somehow Wake Forest, I feel like is a non-winnable game. And then the two games we want to win the most, I don't see Carolina beating Duke. And as bad as State's defense is, I don't see Carolina beating NC State. So that leaves you Syracuse, that leaves you Stanford, that leaves you Cal. I would say Cal is right there, behind Stanford as the most winnable game that's left on the schedule. With that being said, when I joined another podcast earlier in the week and made my prediction, I picked Carolina to lose and to do so by double digits. So, is the game winnable? Every game is technically winnable, but it's hard for me It's hard for me to see that pathway to victory because Carolina hasn't played close games against Power Four competition. And you look at their 2 wins of the year. Look, man, I made every excuse in the book for the Charlotte win. You were right about this team after the way they looked against Charlotte. You go back to Richmond. It wasn't really until the middle part of the third quarter before they even put that game away effectively. Yeah. So we've really seen how limited this group is. So it's hard to see a pathway to victory. But every game is winnable until technically it's not.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the best way to look at it. Hopefully that this is a game that Carolina can compete in. I mean, that's the thing. Are you trying to just compete? Like, is this a game where you can take a moral victory away? And I think, believe it or not, because I think that Cal is better than Central Florida. I know you said earlier that you thought that Cal was the worst of the power conference teams that we faced so far. I think Cal's better than Central Florida is, the way that they've been playing early on this season. So, this could be one of those games where, if Carolina loses, but they actually look like they have a pulse and they actually do some of the things that we were talking about fundamentally, the offense is able to move the field a little bit. Even if you come away with a loss, you can probably look at this as a little bit of a moral victory for this team, because that's just what we're looking for at this point. So yes, this game, probably I'm with you. I think that the threesome that you threw together right there is probably the group that you look at and say, this is the only group that you actually have a chance of winning. I would love to believe that you could actually beat NC State because of how bad that defense is, but I don't know if I can even get to that point. So yeah, I mean, you've got to find a way to me, just find a way to win. Can you win two? Can you win two of those three, or is that asking too much? I don't know, but I don't know if this is going to be the one out of that group that they're going to be able to win. All right, let's get to the keys to the game here really quickly. First key to the game, I think, is win the line of scrimmage. This is a team that isn't necessarily great on the line of scrimmage. If you're Carolina, really, you just want to be able to run the football, and you want to be able to slow down the run on the other side, move that offensive line back. And it leads into our second key to the game, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But really, you just want to be able to control that line of scrimmage, dictate the way that the game goes, the pace of the game, everything like that. Carolina hasn't been able to do that this year because they haven't been able to win at the line of scrimmage. I'd like to see this be a game where Carolina can actually run the football very successfully. And so that's why the first key to the game is win the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, you say win, I say compete. Because I think if Carolina can just be competitive at the line of scrimmage, the result, whether it's a win or even if it's a loss, I think will look better than what it's looked so far. Because Carolina's just been manhandled up front, especially that defensive line. It was pretty glaring. And, we've been in the stadium for TCU and Clemson, and some of it is just personnel. And then some of it is just sheer will where, this group just knows they don't have the horses, but that doesn't give you an excuse to go out there and get driven into the dirt the way that they have. But that's where that's where it starts and ends. Carolina, if they show improvement fundamentally up front, then they'll look like a better football team on both sides of the football. And you mentioned this isn't the most overpowering, set of trench units that Carolina's played on either side. So it should resemble something closer to what you expected to see coming in. I think if you get Aiden Banfield back on that offensive line, it gives them a chance to really be much more physical at the line of scrimmage, much more dominant in the run game offensively. Defensively, you kind of just are what you are. I think a lot of their improvement, that if they make an improvement, it's going to be schematically. They just don't got the bodies, I don't think, right now to do what we need to do at the point of attack on that side of the ball. But Belichick talked about it. The sooner they get better up front on both sides of the ball, the sooner the scoreboard will reflect the progress he's been talking about.
Yeah, and the hope is that they're going to be able to do that relatively quickly with the recruiting class that they're bringing in this year. You mentioned, hopefully the return of Aiden Banfield along the offensive line will allow them to have a little more success, albeit he hasn't exactly been great so far this year, but Willow Steen, when he was in there in the last game, really struggled against Clemson. All right, second key to the game, pressure Sagapuatele. I think that is the most important thing that Carolina can do in this game, because he is a guy that has shown you that he is capable of turning the football over. He's had some moments where he's looked really good, but when teams have been able to get that pressure on him and when he's had to throw from a dirty pocket, that's when he started to turn the ball over. I think it's been very tough for Carolina so far. One thing that was noticeable about the depth chart that they released the other day, Price Gates nowhere to be found on it, so don't know how much playing time he's necessarily going to get. I would like to see him out there because I thought even though he didn't play a ton of reps in this last game, I thought he was pretty effective. I thought he was a guy that was at least giving some effort out there and was, a couple of times making some moves to get into the backfield. I'd like to see him out there. I'd like to see somebody like Milcart Abujade get into the backfield a little bit more than he has so far this season. Same thing with Smith Vilbert, those guys that play a lot for Carolina on the defensive line. But this is the one I'm probably the least certain about that Carolina is going to be able to execute in this game. But that's the way you can find a way to win this one.
Yeah, Michael Lombardi said that they've put in some more coverages defensively. Carolina's pressure is going to come from scheme. And can you dial up some blitzes? I think you've got to be prepared to send, Kamori House and Andrew Simpson. Both of those guys, I think, are going to become blitzing linebackers because Carolina, especially if Price Yates can't go, has really struggled to get consistent pressure on the quarterback. But, I mean, can you confuse a young quarterback? And this is something Belichick was famous for doing at the NFL level. He didn't lose to young quarterbacks. Rookie, second-year guys, he didn't beat them. And usually because he beat them mentally, because he would disguise and, just throw so many different looks at him to where that quarterback would get overwhelmed, make a mistake or two. Well, can you confuse him at the line of scrimmage and make him hold the ball for a second or two longer? And I think some people think that we over-exaggerate. But if you can make him hold it for 5, 6, 7 seconds, all of a sudden you got a chance to get after him. If you're playing off and the ball is getting out in 2, 3 seconds, then Carolina's not going to be able to get pressure on him. So I think hopefully this is a game you've had some. You knew you weren't going to have Thad, so you were able to prepare for not having Thad. You put him to different coverages. Can you scheme up a blitz or two? Throw in a disguised coverage that gets him confused. Make him hold on to the ball a little longer than normal. You get to him, maybe you force a fumble, something like that, get off the field more frequently on third down. And if Carolina does that, I think it's plausible to see the game still being in doubt when we're sitting there at 1 o'clock in the morning in the third or fourth quarter.
Yeah. Disguising pressure, bringing pressure from your linebackers, from your safeties, even hell, from your corners. Certainly something that I think Carolina has to play around with this season to at least try to slow down some of these passing games. That's the best way to do it, is to be able to get pressure on the quarterback, especially when you're playing so much zone defense like Carolina is doing. And I think that's up to Steve Belichick to dial some of that stuff up. But you got to get to a point, I guess, where you trust some of those defensive backs. I don't know if we're going to get to that point this season. And the last thing is create some turnovers. We talked about it with Sagapuatele being a guy that can turn the football over. Carolina also has to be aggressive at trying to rip the ball out with some of these backs that you're going to see, primarily Kendrick Raphael. This just has to be a game. If we're looking at how does Carolina win this game, creating turnovers, having a margin of, 3-0 in the turnover area, even 2-0 in the turnover area could give you a chance, could give you those extra possessions that you need for this offense, which has struggled so much this year. I think that's probably the third key to the game for Carolina if they're going to find a way to pull an upset over Cal.
Well, it's a twofold thing too, right? One, if you force a turnover, guess what? That means you're not giving up points. Carolina is not equipped to win games 38-34 like they've done in the years past. Also, if you're forcing turnovers, can you do so in a manner to where your offense is working on the plus side of the 50 and not having to grind out 70, 75, 80-yard drives? Can you force turnovers that impact field position just as much as it impacts the scoreboard as well? I think that would go a long way for an offense that's just trying to find something to hang its hat on. And they've had and there are some teams that, and I bet you Carolina has practiced this. They've probably drilled, okay, how do we respond after forcing a turnover? And that's probably something they've done a lot in practice, just haven't done so in the game. Well, let's do it in a game and see what this offense can do. Can Freddie Kitchens get more out of an offense that maybe has shorter fields to work with? I think asking Carolina to win the turnover battle 3-0 is asking a lot, because 3 turnovers forced would be about a fourth of the possessions in the game. And then you're asking Carolina to not turn it over either. But can you be +2? Can you be 2-0? Can you be 3-1? Can you steal a few possessions away from the opponent? Give your offense a short field. Be able to hit them with the big play action pass, whatever it is. Just make the game easier on them. But I do think you're right. This defense that has been picked apart against Power 4 competition. Can you be opportunistic? Can you give up yards and not points? Can you give up yards with forced turnovers? That's what I think we thought they could be coming into the year. They haven't been that so far. Now's a better time than ever to kind of look like that defense we expected to see all year long.
All right, let's get to our predictions for the game. We're running a little bit late here on this edition of the podcast, but of course, we did have the conversation earlier. If you guys missed it, about the reports that Michael Lombardi did visit Saudi Arabia back in August, make sure you go back and check that out. But what is your prediction for this game, Carolina, 10:30 on a Friday night on ESPN?
The bigger prediction is how late do we both make it? I'm going to take the naps of all naps.
Whole game, baby.
Yeah, I think if it's 31-3 in the third quarter, I'll probably be, going to bed, watch the rest of the game on Saturday when I get back from Columbia, Sunday when I get off of work. But I said 31-20 when I was on the 100 Feet of UNC podcast earlier this week. I'm not going to stray away from my earlier prediction. I do think it looks better. I do think that Carolina gives us a reason to stay up that late. But I do think, turnover here, they do the things that they've done so far that's hindered them. I think those things kind of rear their ugly head once again. I think Carolina loses 31-20, but it gives us something to be more encouraged about when we recap the loss sometime next week.
Yeah, you're more positive than me. I mean, I'm at the point now where I just don't expect anything from this program for the rest of the season. Where they're at, especially with Gio Lopez going to start again in this game, I find it hard to believe this offense is going to be able to muster more than 10 points in this one. That's probably where I got them at. I think it's going to be very similar to what we saw against Clemson. I think there's going to be a moment in that first half where you're going to be sitting there saying to yourself, how in the world have things gotten this bad? How, defensively, I still think there's going to be struggles with tackling. We've seen it in all 3 games so far. I don't think that's an area that they're going to get better at. And I also think that Cal is much better than we thought they were going to be coming into this matchup. So I think Cal ends up winning this game 34-10. I think Carolina gets beat down. And we're on here talking yet again about another really tough loss for Carolina. Regardless of what happens, we'll be there for you guys over on the website, heeltupblog.com. Make sure you go over there now. Check out, we'll have an article up shortly after we're done here about the Michael Lombardi stuff. I swear I'm trying to get to the preview, guys. I'm trying to get to a point where I can write the preview, but there's so much freaking news that keeps coming out about this program. It's unbelievable. Make sure you go and read that. Go back to last night and read the article on Kenton Dobson, the player that Carolina flipped in the 2026 class, the 4-star cornerback, the decommitment of 4-star running back, Amir Brown. If you want to read that, that's up there on the website, and plenty of other stuff for you guys to check out with our coverage of Carolina football. Of course, we'll have that preview up there for you guys. That'll be up sometime tomorrow for you guys to check out. And then, of course, we will have full coverage after the game is over with a recap of the game, and then be taking you throughout the rest of the season. Meanwhile, on the basketball side of things, we are closing in exhibition next Friday against BYU. So we'll, of course, have you covered if we can on that. If they do end up streaming that, we will have you covered on that front. We'll tell you everything you need to know. Josh is going to write an article regardless leading into the game to preview the matchup against BYU. So make sure that you guys keep an eye out for that. Of course, once we get in season, and we'll have the normal previews and recaps that we'll be doing for you guys on the website, and any other news that comes out. Of course, we are still awaiting the clearance of Luka Bogavas. So that is certainly something that we are going to be keeping a strong eye on. The minute that we get any sort of news on that front, we will have an article up on the website for you guys detailing what is going on. And then, on the podcast side of things, same areas that you get this podcast, whether it is, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, every edition of the podcast is streamed at this point. So you won't miss anything there. If you're a listener to the podcast, anywhere you get your podcast is where you can get the Four Corners podcast. Same thing with the Heel Tough Blog podcast, which you have just listened to right here. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. Once again, want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.